I don't know. Oh yeah, I do have to be really close. Right. Oh, I think I've made it worse. I know. I think true professors walk and talk. Right? Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Crump, and I'm going to speak in English if that's okay. I did Google Translate my slides. So if they are incorrect, it is Google's. It's because of Google, not because of me. But I understand Spanish okay, and so we can converse, and I have friends who can translate for me if we need. Um, so, yeah, I'll start. I am a rural sociologist, and I'm a professor at University of California, Davis, and I mostly study responses to from farmers to natural disasters and climate change. And I'm really interested in farmers who are not uh, who are different, who face some sort of challenge. So whether those farmers are women or indigenous people or pastoralists or maybe migrants, that's my specialty. And I am a professor in our International Agricultural Development Program. We have a master's and a bachelor's degree program. We do some PhDs, but our PhDs receive geography PhDs. And those are the ones that study international development. So my talk is mostly about my research, and my research is really centered on food security. And so food security happens when people have access to food that they want to eat, that makes them feel good inside, that is highly nutritious, and is consistent over time. They have to be able to afford that food, and they have to be able to use that food as well, so it cannot go to waste. And that's where my research is centered, is all along food security. And this is because over the entire world, we lack, some of us have too many calories, and many of us do not have enough calories. And so it's estimated that, almost 1/8 of the world does not have enough calories every day. And I'm more interested in nutrition than I am in calories, so I'm interested in the micronutrients that people need in order to be as healthy as possible. And there are some reasons that some countries lag behind in terms of meeting their basic needs, and that can be problems such as conflict and political instability, climate change, or inefficient agricultural systems. And those three things are what I study mostly. So a lot of our work has been in areas of conflict. I actually started working in international development, working in Bosnia and Serbia in the 1990s, and was not doing agriculture work, but that's where I really learned how resilient a person can be after a conflict. And then I'm really interested in how we could make agriculture work for more people. And this is just a representation of what happens for food security and climate change. And it's very complex, but during a changing climate, we not only have the things happening to the environment, but we have a lot of things happening to the people, and in terms of nutrition. All of these things affect nutrition. I didn't bring over the right slides. I have my slides in English here. And we know that disasters are happening more frequently over time. And so this is just a an example of the different kinds of disasters that can happen in different parts of the world. And so we can't have the same solution for every single place in the world because every place is different. And all of these things are happening more often. And it's really important to know that, again, I really am focused on how food security interacts with nutrition. This shows the food insecurity at different scales, and we have the most food insecure is in the darker color, and the still food insecure is in the lighter color. But this goes from 2015 to 2023, so we can see the impact of the pandemic is here. And so food insecurity is actually increasing, even though we know more things about agriculture, and it's happening everywhere in the Americas, in Africa, all over the world, and it's not getting better. So I have a lot of examples in my talk about different kinds of, I wonder if I have the right talk up. Hold on, let me look. I feel like it doesn't match what I wonder if I have the talk. Oh no. Yeah. I have the one that I was going to do. It's very similar. Yes, exactly. But I have my own my team. I knew I had other things. I'm sorry. This is my team, and these are all graduate students that work on my team. They come from all over the world, and these are the places that we study. And I put the map upside down because in the United States, we like to pretend we're the best. and we always have our map like this. But in my office, the map looks like this because the earth is round, right? So my team has projects in all sorts of places. So we have been working in Latin America and in China, Nepal, all throughout Africa. And this is just in the last 5 years where we've been working. And we really look at the intersections of equality and equity. And the difference here is when we give somebody equal things, then we are not really accommodating everybody the same way, right? And so what my research really tries to do is focus on on equity for farmers. And so trying to understand whether it's a law that needs to change or whether it's, what would make it different? What would make it more equitable for everybody? Okay, and we've already kind of talked about this, but my research is at food security and disasters and vulnerable people. We research these types of people because they are overrepresented among the world's poor. So in a perfect world, because there are 50% women on Earth, then among the world's poor, there would also be 50% women. But unfortunately, it's estimated that up to 63% of the world's poor are women. Same with indigenous people and other people. So these are the folks that our research is focused on, and all throughout the world. And we're really trying to learn how to break this cycle of poverty. So someone becomes vulnerable and they face discrimination, and that excludes them from from society and programs, and that leads to fewer opportunities, which gives them more chronic diseases, which makes them more excluded and more vulnerable. And so this is where we would like to stop. And because disasters are something that impact the most vulnerable, we are also very interested in how we can prepare for disasters and how we could even build agriculture systems so that they could withstand disasters. Because a lot of the problems after a disaster come much later after a disaster. And so in my research, I look at these three concepts in resiliency. So persistence, so to be persistent in agriculture means that you may be able to withstand a disaster for a small period of time because you may have access to irrigation or you may have access to extra money that will help you after the disaster. But a better strategy would be to adapt. So to be able to add water, add more irrigation, for example, or add better strategies such as agroecology in order to adapt your system. And an even better but more difficult resiliency strategy is to transform. And that requires farmers to stop doing what they're doing and do something completely different. So they may have grown cattle for a long time, and to be resilient, they may have to stop growing cattle and grow sheep, for example. And so that's truly the most difficult thing for a farmer to do because it takes a lot of resources, and those vulnerable farmers do not have those resources. And what is happening is people have a shock, and then they recover, and then they have a shock, and then they recover only to have another shock. And every time this happens to a person who does not have very much, then they are unable to withstand that. And this is after one of the hurricanes in the United States, a poster that says, "Stop calling me resilient, because every time you say, oh, they're resilient, that means you can do something else to me, and I am not resilient." And that's what we hear from farmers all over the world. So our main questions here are, what kind of policies would increase resiliency and empowerment among different vulnerable agricultural populations? What kind of resiliency strategies are already working, and will they transfer other places? What kind of novel training or extension approaches lead to that type of resiliency to climate change? And we have a lot of help with our research. We do our research with other people, and so our co-researchers range from cows like this to pastoralists, women, migrants, policymakers. We're really trying to build a community of researchers. Our research is mostly qualitative. We want to know why something happens instead of what is happening. It is always participatory. We are doing it with other people. We look at issues of power. So we're driven by feminist theory. And we want it to be empowering, and we want the community to benefit from our work. And this is just some of the work that the students in my research team are doing. Naya is actually here in Colombia right now, and she's doing her research now with the help of Lesage, so thank you. And that's very exciting. And then Isha works in Nepal. Chi Wen is going to work in Hawaii. Caitlin works in Chile. Suyang works in Uganda. Kat is an economist. And then Bob Woodkey works in Senegal, in West Africa. Anna works in Mexico. Megan works in South Africa. And Tatiana is interested in fires, and she works in California. We have a lot of fires in California. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of our research projects, and then I would love to have a good conversation about those. And so I picked out some that I thought you would be very interested in. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the project in Mexico. And this is done by Ana Zepeda. She is a doctoral student in geography, and she is going to finish next year and will need a professor job if you have one. And yes, really amazing student. So her research is in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And northern Merida, the northern part of the town, is home to wealthy people and people who retire from the United States. And in the southern part is the poorer people, and that is the part of the town that was not built to withstand different kinds of disasters, in particular flooding. And so when COVID happened, the community did not have very much work to do, and they had a hard time feeding their children. And so this comedor started. It's a grassroots comedor, and they started to bring food together so that they could feed their kids all together. And I know that comedor means a dining room, but this is more of an outdoor space, and it's a space for people to gather. So during COVID-19, let's see, this one is not reading very well. These are some of during COVID-19, these are some of the challenges that happened to the families and some of the ways that they were resilient. So some of the ways that they ended up raising money was to collect plastic recyclables and bring that money together so that and actually get some grants from the government as well. And so it's become a really big gathering place for everybody in the community. We've been learning more about the different types of hazards that they have. And in addition to the pandemic, there are very strong winds and rains and hurricanes and no potable water. There's also a lot of inaccessibility because the government has built a really large highway there, and so the women are unable to gather the food that they need when they need it. So these are all causing pressures on the comedor. And so what we're really learning is that the comedor is a space that improves the women's food security and the community's food security. And a lot of women participate in the comedor, and they have expanded beyond just giving food, but they are also using it for classes in English. When Anna was there, or every time Anna goes, she teaches English. There's different types of field trips and movie nights, and they can get together school supplies, and so they're really becoming a community in themselves. And this type of comedor is not unique, right? We see this all the time, but it is a really good example of how people can band together to become resilient to disaster. And she will finish that research coming up soon. She was just in Mexico like 2 weeks ago, so she will finish. My next research that I wanted to talk about is very similar, and this is in rural Nepal, and this is also PhD student Isha. So when the pandemic hit, we all had mobility restrictions, right? And we had a lot of market disruption, and in Nepal, they had a loss of employment, and the households were driven towards food insecurity. And there was this idea that if you were a rural person, you were going to be better off because you could grow your own food instead of have to purchase your food. And but what we were hearing from the rural areas was that was not true, and that was even though research was coming out saying that. Nepal is between China and India. It's got the highest mountains in the world. It has 29 million people, and almost all of those people are involved in agriculture. Most of that is subsistence-based agriculture, and however, most of their money comes to them from remittances when people travel abroad. And indeed, 1,700, that's true, every day, 1,700 Nepal people travel for work. A lot of them will stay in Nepal and go to the nearby cities, but a lot of them will go to India or even the Middle East and Malaysia. And most of those people who travel are men versus women. And like I said, that is because because so much money comes from remittances back to the people. When they were not allowed to travel, we wanted to know whether they were going to be okay. So if you could not travel for work, what was going to happen to your food security? And when a lot of men travel, what happens to women is what we call this triple burden and I hope that translated right. But women, they have reproductive responsibilities, they have domestic responsibilities, and then they have productive responsibilities. And so all of those things together is what we call the triple burden for women. Men typically only have maybe one or two of these responsibilities, not all three. Compounding that is that in Nepal, there is a caste system. And so there are more higher castes who are allowed to do certain jobs, and then there are lower castes who are the workers. And legally, this caste system is no longer, but in practice, this is still happening. And so the two groups that we worked with were the Dalits, who are known as the untouchables. They are very poor people, people of color, and the Chepang, who are part of the indigenous people. So our research was here. So Kathmandu is over here. And this is what it looks like. So Isha would fly in an airplane for 1 hour, then she would get on a bus for like 18 hours, and then she would walk for 4 hours to get to this village here. It's just amazing, really. They farm all year long, but for 3 to 6 months, they are food insecure. And that leads to migrating and to wild foraging. And again, most of the women here are of those lower castes. So what we wanted to know was, what are the impacts of the COVID-19, of those lockdowns? What was the short-term and the long-term impact? And then how are they coping with that food insecurity? And then are there differences with people who are older versus people who are younger, or people in those different castes? We used a feminist framework here, which just really shows that women lead lots of different kinds of lives. They are mothers and sisters and farmers, and how crisis affects everyone is not universal, and there are already existing inequalities that affect different people differently. I wanted to put these in here so you could see Isha and her research. So yes, this was, I can't believe I let her do all of this stuff by herself, but this is a leech. Do you have these here? Yeah. And she would have to walk for a very long time in water. So, and she's not a very big person either. But the other thing she did was, so she did semi-structured interviews, so one-on-one interviews, and then these focus group discussions for her research. And she did a lot of her research with the community as they were doing things. So Isha did weeding, she did corn shelling, everything that she needed to do. Good. And so we really wanted to know, so our findings are that these crises, they really force people into to take loans, and that just reinforces that cycle of poverty because those loans are at really high interest rates, and that makes it very difficult for them. But there was strengthened solidarity in this community during the crisis. And so she even saw examples where of people in the lower castes dining and eating and making food with the people of the higher castes, and that is something that is not typical normally in Nepal. And then they explored these old crops. I think I have a picture of one. Yeah. So they were unable, again, it's a 4-hour hike down into a market. And because they were not able to leave, they quickly ran out of cooking oil. And so there were old people in the village who remembered that you could make butter from this and make like it's like a cocoa butter similar from this tree here. And so the old people taught the young women how to do that, and that was really good. And they're still using this kind of oil today, 5 years later, rather than going and buying oil. So that was really great. I think I might skip this one and go. I'll just end with this last one. So one piece of research that we are pioneering, so you're the first people to really see it. Don't give it away. No, just kidding. So this is my colleague, Chelsea McCumber, and she designed an activity that you can use within communities to measure empowerment. And the way that this works, she wanted to know what a community felt would be, or what people felt would be most empowering to those people. And she wanted something that would be very conversational and participatory, and that would really require a lot of community engagement. And so the paper is here, so I'll give you the slides later. And so she developed, this is an activity you do in a focus group, and you have the community draw this, and you split them into groups. So you have groups that may be men and groups of women, and you have them draw the most empowered woman and the most empowered man, and then the least empowered woman and the most empowered man. And then you have a conversation in the middle with the community. You don't end up drawing that person, but you have a conversation about what would make somebody who does not have power have more power in our community. And I do this regularly, even at school, and right now, and it changes over time, but right now at UC Davis, at least, the most empowered women are usually like Taylor Swift, and the most empowered men are usually politicians. And so it's really interesting to see how different students do this differently. And so in the community, you're having a conversation with the people in the community, and you are asking them, what are the relationships that these people have, and where do they live, and what are their roles and responsibilities. And in Chelsea's research, she has really found that just having this conversation with the community makes amazing change in the community, because community members realize that maybe there's something that they are doing that's keeping somebody poor or keeping somebody disempowered. And it's often, and they do it for the men, and you have this reflection with the community, and you ask them questions such as, like, what could we do as a society or as a community to help support the people? And in Chelsea's research, in her research, she's really come up with some amazing findings in different kinds of communities. And I had been doing this activity with students, teaching them about it. And we decided to adapt it. And so we are adapting the research to resiliency. And so this is the last piece of research that I'll show you. And this is from Micah Metz Houston. And he graduated last week with a master's in international agricultural development. And his work was in Rwanda. So in Rwanda, in Central Africa, 70% of the population works in agriculture, and they are vulnerable to flooding and erosion. It's very steep hills, very much like Colombia, actually. Parts of it do look very similar. And they use conventional agriculture that is reliant on pesticides and fertilizers. And so the opportunity here is to use conservation agriculture. So making sure that we're not improving the health of the soil, increasing the yields. And for many years, there has been a farmer field school, La Escuela de Campo, so a farmer field school, teaching people about this conservation agriculture method. So here you can see the erosion that can happen there. So farmer field schools, if you're not aware, they are informal education. They are participatory. There's usually 15 to 30 farmers, and there's a facilitator, but then the farmers actually have their own experimental plot. And so they say that the plot is the teacher, or the plant is the teacher. And because the farmers farm together their own experimental plot, there's a lot of really high-level learning that takes place. And so, they get to actively experiment on it and have these nice reflective learning processes. And so a farmer field school is really high-level learning. And a lot of people measure the impact of a farmer field school solely on how much money it makes. And so after a farmer field school, these are the economists. After a farmer field school, are the farmers making more money? Is their yield increased? Do they have savings? And as you move out in this circle, you get higher level impacts. And so direct outputs might be knowledge, which leads to higher income, which leads to you being able to save money, which gives you reduced poverty. But what we wanted to look at, and sometimes they look at agroecology and farmer field schools through this natural lens, but we wanted to look at the social lens. And so we changed, and so these are our research questions, which are: how do farmers think about food security and resilience? What does participation in that farmer field school do for resilience? And what are the advantages for farmers to participate in the farmer field school? And there's Micah doing his research. This is a case study, and we did different methods, including that same concept drawing with the community. And that's what I'm going to show you mostly. So we took that drawing activity about the most empowered people, and we changed it to the most resilient community. And so we had them draw the most resilient community, the least resilient community, and then talk about it. And so there were 4 different types of, or we had small groups, and they brainstormed about what resiliency was. They drew it, and then they reflected on it, and then they made decisions on how to actually change their community for better. And so these are the drawings some of the drawings that he had. And so this is the least resilient community. And so you can see here that in this least resilient community, we have a lot of erosion. We have kids that are working, and this is supposed to be the school, so they're not going to school. Let's see, I can't remember. Erosion, lack of unity. They really felt like the one other thing they identified was that in a not resilient community, there's instability in the family. And they also identified that they didn't have good connections from that community to other communities. However, in the most resilient community, they have better designed land use, they have really high quality housing, and key to that was good governance. And so everything was really well structured, and their families were very close. And so these are some things that we found. And so we learned that climate resilience is a continuous process of learning and adapting for on and off farm practices, that poverty and social instability are the barriers to climate resilience, and that transformation really requires that political support, different kinds of capacity building, and the collective action. And so this quote here says, "This family living with quarrels and disputes, it's like the family is in a stunted state. And once the family is stunted, the whole community is stunted, and the country is stunted as well, because it doesn't progress." I hope that translated over. Not too bad. Go Google. Okay. And then the farmer field school that they participated in also had a lot of benefits. So there was an increase in crop yields, and they started saving more money. And then it was also personally and socially transformative. And so this person, Esther, talks about how she didn't save before, and that she was also lonely. I think that's what that word is, yeah. So she said she was lonely, and she just did the farmer field school to not be lonely anymore. And she actually used this word "saved," that the farmer field school and the community saved her. And then our third question, which was what are the advantages of that type of system, is definitely building more confidence in the community, and really helping each other kind of get through those barriers. And so the group learning was really effective in this type of program. So in conclusion on that study, the farmer field school improved crop yields and food security and resiliency, but really needs to be scaled in order to make a lot more change in Rwanda for sure. So, in summary, I hope I gave you a glimpse at some of our research. Our research is really participatory. One thing I didn't mention about the Mexico research is we're using a bingo game that's adapted from the Mexican Loteria game in order to get people to talk about issues around disasters, because that's really hard for them to talk about. Resiliency is really tied to these strong social networks, is what we're finding, and definitely more interdisciplinary work, like more social scientists helping the scientists would be really great. So that's all I had. I wanted to have lots of time for questions. Cool. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So, thanks. All right, let's have a relaxed kind of question session. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can talk about that. So a lot of in international development work, a lot of focus has been on getting people calories, and so making sure they have enough rice and wheat and corn and potatoes, but not enough really focused on the more nutritious foods such as vitamin A enriched foods and yeah, primarily in my work it's been focused on vitamin A foods and then other types of vegetables. And so because food security is more than just having enough to eat, right? It's having food that you culturally want, and then food that actually nourishes you. So most of my research has always been on foods that make you food systems where the foods are highly nutritious, primarily in vegetables. And I've mostly focused on vegetables because vegetables are accessible to women, whereas fruits are, especially tree fruits, are very hard for women to grow because once you plant a tree and you may not own land, you may not see the fruit of that tree. So, yeah. So I think that's what I hope that clarified. Yeah. In the other talk, because I switched talks, yeah, but in the other talk, I went more into the nutritious foods piece. Yeah. That was for the Utopian students. Yeah. I might have to turn my economist friend over here, but so there are. You're right. It would not take a lot of. It would not be that hard. There's an economist, Jeffrey Sachs, who has. He doesn't really focus on food security, but he focuses on poverty, and he really believes that definitely we're not investing enough in alleviating poverty, and I think that goes hand in hand with food security. So I've been working internationally for 20 years, and in my experience, there's usually enough food, but it's not getting to people. Whether that is from like broken value chains where we can't get food, like food is wasted, and um, or just doesn't make it to the grocery store. And then a lot of political, I think politics runs, like there's so many policies that keep farmers poor, whether it's like a lack of insurance to back them up when a crisis hits, or a lack of infrastructure investment into irrigation or something like that. And so I think if there was political will, that would be good. However, when the United States when USAID got destroyed this year, we lost 60% of all international investment into food security. So, isn't that wild? So much money. It wasn't that big, no. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. Yeah. It would so I know. I know. I always wish that like one day of what we spent in Afghanistan could go to USAID. Never would. Yeah. I have a bachelor's in science. I'm good. Yeah. um, I mean, I, yeah, I have been in places in Central America where I say, "Why are you growing that corn here?" And they say, "Because we have to." Yeah, and so I think that, well, part of food security is having that cultural tie to food as well, and having food that makes you happy inside. And so I think that there's a lot of, but climate change has really impacted, especially where indigenous people live now, because indigenous people were able to move more than they are allowed to now. And so because of colonization and the shrinkage of where indigenous people can live, the places where they live are more vulnerable to climate change than any other place that anybody else lives. And so, um, I don't, yeah, my work with indigenous people has been really interesting because they have these traditional ways, and I think that they should be honored. But the investment from scientific research into those crops has been very little, and especially figuring out how to adapt those crops to this new environment. I think that is really important, um, and and so that people can still grow those types of foods. I think there's a lot of lost foods as well. So yes, like corn, blue corn is still there, but that would have been complemented by another food that they might have foraged that is no longer here. And so I think that that type of research really needs to be done as well. I'm not as familiar with the Americas in that part of research, but in Africa, you know, corn is from here, and Africans like eat corn. They eat more corn than you do, and like a lot more than you do, I think. and because that was brought by the colonizers, and that has displaced almost all of their native foods that could be resilient to the environment now. And so UC Davis is investing in sequencing the genomes of 100 different African crops that have nobody's ever done study on them, and they're doing that before they are extinct, essentially, so that they can do research on them. And I would like to see that happen in the Americas too, I think. Yeah, I think there's just things we're missing, right? As the colonizers came in and changed the diets of people, you know, what feels traditional may not have been what they had available to them. Yeah, and I'm really interested in their experience, right? I think indigenous people have a lot to teach us about growing food and about being resilient to climate change. And I recently read a book that was written by an indigenous person from New Zealand who was just imploring us to listen to them and stop with our capitalistic food system. Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't really answer your question, but I hope it gives you things to think about. Okay. Yeah. 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 Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That is such a good resource, that seed bank, and there are duplicates there of other seed banks, and so, um, like for instance, in Syria, there was a research center, and all of their things are gone, of course, and so that is tapped in, and or that having the duplicates up there is just really amazing, and that's part of the what UC Davis is doing as well, is sending accessions there as well. And and then we have a plant breeding academy, which is focused on African plant breeders, to train them how to do these modern techniques of molecular transformation, and so that they can breed things faster. Yeah. Well, some of the new techniques are not truly GMO techniques, right? They're just using assisted selection. Yeah, yeah, yes, but it definitely would make the it would definitely, yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah, yeah, for sure, yeah. It speeds it up, but it's not without its own ethical things. Yeah. No, I like that. It's okay. I can do it. I have my computer. Oh, my giant map. Hmm. Yes. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, what are you're asking? Like, oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you asked. So what we've learned from studying women in women farmers all throughout the world is that women are the ones who make nutritional choices for their children. So they are often, and when women are earning money, they almost always spend it on their children. Whereas when men earn money, they don't always spend it on their children. And you're laughing, I know. And so giving a woman just a little bit extra money will usually benefit a child. The other thing that benefits women is more education. So for every year that you can give a woman education, I don't remember the numbers, but her yield her agricultural yield increases. And that's because she has the ability to, with more education, she has the ability to take out loans where she could not do that before because maybe she wasn't literate. She has the ability to understand science a little bit more, so she understands implications of like fertilizer or pesticides. And then, and they have greater access to assets. So study after study shows that when you invest in women, that their agriculture increases and then the nutrition of their family improves as well. And I don't know, but the focus has always been on men. I think one thing is that when policymakers and people like me who do development go to a region, we have our own biases about who we think the decision makers are in a family, and we bring that to those new communities as well. So for many years, all of the agricultural technologies were only given to men, and nobody really noticed that women were also working in the fields, and they assumed that women had equal decision-making power, similar to what I wouldn't call it equal in the United States either, but more equal. And as a result, just left the women behind. But there are a lot of problems with that as well. One of them, I don't have it lit up here, but one of my graduate students many years ago, she researched in Uganda because we were seeing that women were not able to own land, they could only rent land. And when women made any improvements to the land, so if they added irrigation to the land or added a permanent crop to the land, that the men would take that land from them. And it seemed like, and then even if that wasn't the case, every time they started being an expert in some sort of crop and making a lot of money, the men would take that crop from them. And so we were really interested in, like, where's the balance between giving women more money but not too much so that they lose access to that crop? And she investigated that and found that women hold on to that as long as they can. So they will, in Uganda, they were sewing money into their clothes so that men would not know that they were making extra money. And they were hiding lots of things, and then they would become the expert on that crop in such a way that they would not, when the men tried to grow it, they were not as successful, right? And they would not give them the secrets. And I had a previous research in Sierra Leone where we were trying to get people to use better cooking stoves, and the women, if the men wanted the women to do it, the women would not do it. So I think these gender issues are really big, but when you invest in women, they really do feed their families better. And a lot of it is this triple burden as well, because they have so many responsibilities that they're really spread thin. And I don't know how it is in Colombia, but in some Central American countries where I've worked, rural women are not taught Spanish. They're only speak the indigenous language. And as a result, that limits their market access because they can only sell crops locally. They also are not allowed to travel very far. And so that limits them going into Guatemala City and selling their products as well. So a lot of educational system that in Guatemala for sure, they need more rural education for girls because girls hardly ever go to like middle school or high school and hardly ever learn Spanish. Yeah, it's really hard. Um, not that much. We have not really. My group has not done that. There is some work on that from the International Food Policy Research Institute, and I can't remember it right now. But we've never really disaggregated with single mothers. And in some of the countries where we work, there are many wives to one man, and so the a household, it looks very different. And indeed, like even a single mother household is going to look different because she might have extended family as well, right? And so, yeah, we've never really teased that apart. It is something we should probably add to our body of knowledge. Yeah, that would be really interesting to know how that's different. I imagine that, yeah, they still face that triple burden of working, but working more and then trying to feed their families and still do their social obligations. Yeah, that seems like a lot. Yeah, the hard thing is families are so different in every country, right? Um, yeah. 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 Yeah, it's really complicated. And like you said, we've seen that in almost every country we've worked in that suffers a disaster is that men are relied upon and there's a group of scholars in the United States who look at disaster and women. And after a disaster, men are like, they will go short term to the city to get work and send money home. That's their role in providing for the family, and they'll leave the women and children home. And because the place where they live has been destroyed by a disaster, that makes them more vulnerable to disease and I've also seen when in Central America, when men migrate to the United States, even though they're sending money home, they're leaving their women in charge of their farms. And one of our studies looked at how to reach those women because because of social reasons, the women were not allowed to talk or not allowed to get advice from agricultural extension agents or to take out loans or whatever they needed. And often they would not make decisions about the farm without the man. And so they would have to call the man. And by then, you have a pest eating your eating your corn. And so we were really trying to understand how you could reach women better. And our answer in that study was to reach them on the radio in indigenous languages. They really trusted that more than being able to, because they weren't able to talk to, get advice from a man. Yeah, because they would be seen as cheating or something. The gender dynamics are so interesting in how we treat each other. And that's why doing that empowerment exercise with a community where you do the most empowered, least empowered man and woman, it is very illuminating to the folks. When they look at the least empowered woman and the least empowered man, they always notice that the least empowered man is still more empowered than the least empowered woman. And they start to really talk about it. In one of Chesney's papers, she talks about this community who they actually started laughing, and she says, "Why are you laughing?" And they said, "Well, the most empowered woman is a woman whose husband has died, and so this was in Africa somewhere, and so she is like in charge of her household. And the least empowered woman is one who's divorced." And they're like, both of them don't have a man. And then they started giggling. They're like, well, we shouldn't go around killing all the men, right? But it was just having those 4 pictures there was just, the community was like, what are we doing? Like, why do we treat these women who are divorced differently than we treat the women who are widows? And so that's just one step towards like starting to talk about those and addressing like the policies and like the traditions and things like that. Yeah, I really even in school, among students, I will split the international students off, and if I have enough of like students from a certain country, I'll make them a small group, and then I will do women and men and have them each draw a different empowered person, and then they talk about it, and it's very interesting. Like every community values every group of people values something different, and just knowing that there's that diversity in what we like honor, I think is really interesting. Yeah, definitely. Yep, exactly. Yep. Yeah. And they're still facing the same thing and have the same family structure. But yeah, right. That's true. She may or may not have property. In a lot of countries, women cannot inherit property, so it would go to a brother, or maybe an older son if she had an older son. Yeah, so that complicates it too. But yeah, you're right. Typically, if you're divorced, you would be like, sorry, you have no place to go because your parents already paid to have you married to somebody. Yeah. No, that will be different as well. Well, it depends on the community as well. Yeah. Um, Older women tend to have more prestige and yeah, and fare a little bit better. So as you're talking to the community and figuring out like, well, what's really making this person vulnerable, keep asking, as the facilitator, you keep asking questions. You know, why is this person not empowered? And then the community can, they see that difference. I'm always amazed in like some of the ones I've done. The women who are empowered are women who have to be very like well educated, but the man might just be famous. So I actually did it here. For the Lesage students, and the most empowered woman was the mayor from Bogota, right? Yeah, and then their most empowered man was the former president person who lives in Florida, or not, or maybe he's not president, but somebody who brokered the peace. Yeah, so I can still find those drawings somewhere. Yeah. Yeah. It's power. Yep. It's where they have their power, right? Yeah. That is very interesting. I like a strong woman. That's good. Um, One like that who like knows her own power and can use it, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. There's probably not really a scientific definition. That's just Amanda. Yes. Yeah. The one in my office is a real map that I had to have printed from France because nobody else would do an upside down map. But it's upside down, but the words are not upside down. Yes. It's not a very good one. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. The map in my office is closer to being correct. But no, like in most maps, the United States is bigger than like Africa. uh, yeah, I had to. My one in my office is amazing. All the countries are in French, and only occasionally. People from like Chile, and sometimes from Argentina will come in my office, and they said that their map is like that. And sometimes people from Australia, but not every Australian. Um, but but yeah, I mean it makes sense. The Earth is round. Um, yeah, yeah, yes, right. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. But this was the only one that allowed me to light up different countries. So that's where I'm at. Yeah, it's fun places. Any other questions? Cool. thanks. That was fun. It's fun to talk about my students' research. Yeah, thanks. No, Chesney was just a colleague. We were on a project. We were doing research together. And she was a postdoc then at University of Florida, and when she devised this work, and yeah, just really monumental. Yeah, she's now at University of Connecticut, and she was just really. We have a way to measure empowerment that's quantitative, and it's very American centric. So it values the things, the measures, the questions, and the like the weighting of the questions. Really values things that Americans value. So like joint decision making and speaking in public is something that we think is empowering, or being able to be a leader, and that's not necessarily empowering in every community. And so she wanted something that was defined. She wanted empowerment to be defined by the community instead of being defined by the Americans. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The other way, and the other way is like gives you a Z score, and you know if like, and you can measure men with the women's empowerment index, and then you can look at men versus women, but it doesn't really tell you much, you know. Yeah. So she was frustrated by that and wanted it to be community defined or person defined. Because if I asked each of you what empowerment means, you would all have a different answer, right? And so, yeah, that's what she was aiming for. Um, a little bit. So, I mean, Africans have changed religion to suit them. So even Christianity doesn't look quite the same, and Islam doesn't look quite the same as well. Um, and but yeah, there's different roles. So women will have different roles within the household depending on what the major religion is, and then whether the country has polygamy, more than one wife, really makes a big difference, and where that wife is in the list, in the hierarchy of wives, makes a difference. And so, but it's very, it's I don't know. It's very interesting. We're learning lots of things about people, but yeah, vastly different. West Africans are a lot different than Southern Africans and East Africans, and even within the groups that we study. So right now, most of our work in Africa. Well, I just had one of my students. She just texted. I saw she landed in Uganda today. So she's doing research on women who have disabilities, and those disabilities were mostly caused by their civil war. But then the research that we have in Senegal is with pastoral people, and these are a certain ethnic group, an indigenous ethnic group called the Pular, and they are not they're not really Muslim, but they're not really not Muslim. And they have always been traditionally pastoralists who move their animals and with the grass, and they have mostly relied on cattle, and their main protein source is blood from cattle. So they don't kill the cattle; they just take some of their blood and eat that, and then they have milk and kind of like a cheese, yogurt kind of thing. And so we were really interested in how climate change is affecting them. And we're learning, my student Bob, he's almost finished with his dissertation. And there's so many interesting things, like they're making some poor choices. There's this group of economists who talk about poor choices of the poor. So they sometimes are buying sheep and goats. Instead of switching to sheep and goats, they're buying sheep and goats and using all of their resources to feed the sheep and goats, and then they sell the sheep and goats in order to get enough food for their cows, to keep their cows alive, but their cows are still dying. So they're not making very good choices that way. And as a result, so that get back to religion, there is a bride price there. So when you get married, the woman's parents have to pay the man who's marrying the woman, and that is set by the imam. So they are in the Muslim religion, and that has traditionally been paid in cattle. And while I reject the fact that we have to be paid for as women, it's still a certain amount of cattle would set a couple up for success. So the bride price traditionally might have been 15 cows. And so for a young couple who are starting their lives together, that is a really great opportunity to have 15 cows. But now the bride price is down to 4 cows because just people don't have cows, and so they have reduced that, and that's making them less resilient, because even then they don't have a good start as a family. So yeah, so religion is very intertwined in a lot of things. But even their Catholics aren't like your Catholics, I think. Yeah. The food is better in West Africa. The French were there. So I think that's why. Don't quote me on that. I'm probably still live streaming.